Welcome back! My name is BALLERSCUBA. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1977. Today, we're going to talk about the honorable mentions of 1977. We will start with TSR and Dungeons & Dragons. In July 1977, TSR released the Dungeons & Dragons Basic Set. The D&D Basic Set was an introductory version of Dungeons & Dragons written by outside writer John Eric Holmes. It featured the rules from the original Dungeons & Dragons box set and the first supplement to the game, Greyhawk. The Basic Set went over character creation, the first 3 levels of character progression, and the basics of the game's concepts and gameplay in a more easily understood and unified format. The Basic Set was not meant to replace the older versions of Dungeons & Dragons. It was designed to make the game more accessible to those unfamiliar with miniature wargaming. Once the users of the Basic Set became more knowledgeable and experienced with the game, there was another version of the game being prepared for them. In September, TSR released the Monster Manual. The Monster Manual was the first publication for the newest edition of Dungeons & Dragons, named Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. The Monster Manual is a 108-page book detailing more than 350 monsters. Some notable new monsters include Onkegs and Beluchatheria, new demons including the Jublex, Manes, and Yinogu, new devils including Asmodeus, Beelzebul, Dispaders, Horn Devils, Irenaeus, Garion, Ice Devils, Lemuries, and Pit Fiends. Ettins, Gas Spores, Homunculi, Lamia, Lucrota, Mimics, Naga, Neo-Otyugs, Night Hags, Otyugs, Peritons, Quasits, Rakshasa, Remoras, Ropers, Shambling Mounds, Shriekers, Troglodytes, Zorns, and Yetis. On top of being the first book designed for advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the 1977 Monster Manual was the first publication by TSR that had to change some of the names of their characters. Due to a threatening letter from the Tolkien estate, the terms Hobbit, Ent, and Balrog were changed to Halfling, Treant, and Baelor. As a result, Gary Gygax would downplay the influence that J.R.R. Tolkien's work had on Dungeons & Dragons for years. TSR also concluded that Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was different enough from the original Dungeons & Dragons that Dave Arneson no longer should be paid royalties on any Advanced Dungeons & Dragons profits. The matter of Arneson's royalties had always been a matter of contention between Arneson and TSR. Dave Arneson, unsurprisingly, disagreed with TSR's decision regarding Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. We will have to continue talking about this in future videos. So let's turn back to Atari, since the Atari VCS was not the only thing Atari made in 1977. Nolan Bushnell was looking to expand his arcade audience beyond pool halls and bars to a more family-friendly location. Influenced by Disney, Bushnell decided on a concept that became Pizza Time Theater, a family-friendly restaurant that would also include cheap animated entertainment and an indoor arcade. Its main mascot would become Chuck E. Cheese. The first location opened in San Jose, California. The concept proved to be quite popular, and the restaurant proved to be a success. 1977 was an important year for computers. On top of the Apple II, 2 other major microcomputer systems were released in 1977. In January 1977, at the Consumer Electronics Show, Commodore released the Commodore PET. The Commodore PET was designed by Chuck Peddle and his team, using the MOS Technology 6502 microchip, either 4 or 8 kilobytes of RAM, a built-in monitor, and a cassette system for saving and loading data. Commodore licensed Microsoft's 6502 BASIC interpreter, using it to create the Commodore BASIC 1.0 interpreter. Microsoft would only receive the initial licensing price for their version of BASIC, despite Commodore continuing to use the interpreter as a base for years. Microsoft would never make a license deal like that again. Despite being announced and released in January 1977, consumers did not typically receive the computer until December 1977. This pushed the release from being one of the first on the market to being released after competitors had already released their computers. On top of that, the Commodore PET received several complaints about the keyboard. The tops would rub off easily and it was unreliable. Replacement keyboards quickly appeared on the market after the initial release. Despite this, the Commodore PET proved to be moderately successful. Orders for the computer were backed up for months, with Commodore unable to meet the demand. The sales price of the computer varied between $495, over $2,100 in 2020, and $895, over $3,800 in 2020, depending on the specifications of the machine and the timing of the order. On August 3rd, 1977, the Tandy Corporation, an American retail conglomerate, released the TRS-80 through their Radio Shack stores. The computer was designed by Don French and Steve Leininger from 1975 to 1977. The TRS-80 ran on a Zilog Z80 processor, an 8-bit microprocessor designed by Zilog, an American startup founded by Ralph Ungerman and Federico Fagin, the designer of the Intel 4004 microprocessor. The Z80 was designed to be a software-compatible extension and enhancement of the Intel 8080 at a much cheaper price. The TRS-80 had 4 kilobytes of DRAM, a basic interpreter, and a 64-character per line monitor. In terms of video games, the TRS-80 came with a version of Blackjack and Backgammon. Radio Shack also sold 4 payroll, personal finance, and educational programs on cassette to go with the computer. The TRS-80 sold for $399 for the base unit, $1,700 in 2020, and $599 for the base unit, a 12-inch monitor, and a tape recorder, over $2,500 in 2020. The hope was that this product would help change Radio Shack's image from a cheap consumer electronics store. Despite initial skepticism from Tandy, the TRS-80 was able to sell over 10,000 computers in just 1.5 months. In its first year, the TRS-80 sold 55,000 computers. The TRS-80 was an enormous success. The TRS-80, the Commodore PET, and the Apple II together would become known as the 1977 Trinity, the 3 most popular personal computers and the ones most influential on the market. Let's turn to the consoles of 1977. Magnavox released 3 new dedicated home consoles in 1977, continuing their Odyssey line with the Odyssey 2000, the Odyssey 3000, and the Odyssey 4000. The Odyssey 2000 was an updated version of the Odyssey 300 released in 1976. The Odyssey 2000 played tennis, hockey, and Smash, the squash game, with the addition of a practice mode variation of Smash played with 1 player. The Odyssey 3000 improved upon the Odyssey 2000, allowing for additional controls to allow for automatic or manual serve, change ball speed, and change the ball deflection angle, and also featured detachable paddle controllers. The Odyssey 4000 was an upgraded version of the Odyssey 3000. It featured 6 games in tennis, hockey, soccer, basketball, Smash, and grid ball. It also included practice modes for basketball and Smash. The Odyssey 4000 featured detachable joystick controllers and color graphics. In Japan, Nintendo, a Japanese toy company, began to release the Color TV game series. This was not Nintendo's first entry into the video game market. In 1974, Nintendo had secured the rights to release the original Magnavox Odyssey in Japan. Finding success, Nintendo began to sell their own consoles. On June 1st, 1977, Nintendo, with the help of Mitsubishi, a Japanese electronics company, released the Color TV game 6 in Japan. The Color TV Game 6 had 6 variants of Pong, or light tennis. Those were tennis, hockey, and volleyball, each in singles or doubles mode. The players would play the games using dials attached directly to the machine. On June 8th, 1977, a week after the release of the Color TV Game 6, Nintendo released the Color TV Game 15. The Color TV Game 15 featured 15 variants of light tennis. The additions were 2 ping-pong-style games and penalty shootout, where the ball is shot past a constantly moving target. The Color TV Game 15 also changed the controllers, allowing the paddle controls to be extended from the console. Each of the Color TV Game consoles released in 1977 would sell over 1 million units. That makes the Color TV Game consoles the best-selling consoles of what would be named the first generation of consoles. Coleco would continue to release the Telstar series of consoles in 1977, releasing 9 different models. The most famous of these is the Coleco Telstar Arcade. The Telstar Arcade came in a triangular shape, featuring 3 different sides for 3 different control schemes. Those were a steering wheel with a lever, a light gun, and 2 paddle dials. Only 4 cartridges were released for the console. The first cartridge contained a racing game, a Pong clone, and a shooting game. The second cartridge contained hockey, tennis, handball, and a target shooting game. The third cartridge contained bonus pinball, shooting gallery, shoot the bear, and deluxe pinball. The fourth cartridge featured naval battle, blast away, and speedball. The Telstar Arcade was an attempt by Coleco to combine several of their consoles into one machine. These consoles, of course, were not the only consoles released in 1977. In total, around 500 consoles were released in 1977 alone. These were considered first-generation consoles, meaning that most of these consoles would only play games that were already programmed into the console itself, typically Pong or a variant of Pong. Although most of these consoles were released across Europe, over 90 of them were released in the United States of America alone. Only 2 consoles were advanced enough to be considered part of the second generation. Those are the Fairchild Channel F and the Atari VCS. With these 2 consoles and their ability to play multiple games with less shelf space and of course at a cheaper cost, the dedicated consoles of the first generation no longer seemed worth the money. The dedicated consoles sold over 5 million units in the United States in 1977, but it was clear that their time in the marketplace was over. And that is the video game industry in 1977. Although we did not highlight any video games in 1977, the video game industry made some big strides in 1977. There are now several platforms, both personal computers and home consoles, where video games could be programmed. The Japanese and European markets are proving to be profitable for video games, and more companies are getting involved in the video game industry. Things are progressing. My name is BALLERSCUBA. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in 1978.
Thank you.